Happy Thursday, mathematicians. Today for math, you're going to need a glue stick, your 3 different highlighters, a pencil, and 3 crayons or color pencils. You're going to need a red, a blue, and a green. In addition, you're going to need your math notebook and blue resource folder that's inside of your anchor binder. Remember, do not take out your blue folder, just have it open so you can get out the resources you need for today's lesson. From the left side, the teach pages, very carefully take off your black clip, leaving everything where it is, but only taking off the page that says forms of numbers. Use the clip, make sure everything's nice and snug again. And on the right side, the classwork side, you're going to take out the page that says read and write numbers. Once you have those 2 pages, close your blue folder and make sure it's still in your anchor binder and tuck it away in your basket. Then you're going to need your math notebook. So you should have your 2 baggies that have your 2 sets of vocabulary cards in the front. And we're going to be opening up to our last lesson that we completed, which was from Monday. That was on page 20 and 21, where we started this next chapter on place value to 100 millions. Before you started your lesson today, you should have reviewed the classwork video where I went over how to get to the right answers. Make sure that you've reached out to let me know if there's something that you are not understanding or I can help you with. So now that we know our page numbers, we're going to go back to the table of contents. So 20 and 21, which means that we're going to start on page 22 with our next lesson. And today's lesson is called Forms of Numbers. And we are going to go ahead and put our date of 9-3-20. Remember, at any point during our lesson, you may pause the video to get yourself caught up and organized, and then push play when you're ready. So we're now going to go back to where page 22 is going to go, and we're going to label the left side for our teach page, and then our right side, which will be set up for our example practice and reflection. So let's set up the left side first. So with your teach page that you just pulled out, turn it over. Use your glue stick, make the frame on the outside and the X going through the middle. Turn your paper over, make sure it's nice and smooth, that you are going to be able to write on it. If your number is partially covered up, just remember to rewrite it. On the right side, you are going to write at the top, example. About halfway down, you're going to write the word practice. And then remember, about maybe a third of the way down, or a third of the way down from that top part, is going to be your reflection. And that's where we bring in writing to make sure that we have an understanding of what our focus and objective of our lesson is. So we are going to be doing this when we are finished with our teach page side. So we're going to start by looking at the left side. And let me move my classwork page. So we're going to be focusing on how to look at different forms of numbers. So when we think of a number, we are looking at 3 different forms. What we call the standard form, the word form, and the expanded form. So when we look at those 3 different types, we need to be able to identify and create what type they're asking us to look at. So we're going to use our highlighters. And I'm going to just use my pink for now and start by highlighting the title, so I know what page to come back to when I'm asked to find the different forms of a number. And then I'm going to use my second color just to highlight the titles of each of these boxes, because I need to remember that there are 3 that I am responsible for being able to identify. So we have some examples of how to move from one form to the next and to the last one. So in a standard form, that's what we consider to be what we would see every day. So they're made up of digits with our commas to indicate the break in periods, and this is where our value is shown. The second way, the word form, is how we would say the actual number using words. So we write down the actual number as the digit as a word. We write down the place values. We also continue to include the commas, and then we finish up with the remaining part of our words. And then the last way that we're going to talk about is how to separate the digits into their values shown by a plus sign. And we call this our accordion. So we start with the standard and then we pull it apart like an accordion to look at separate values by themselves. So we are going to put a little note for ourselves up top. And we're going to say name or write the period only once. And this is going to be important as we start. So name or write the period. And that's when we talked about those houses from our previous lesson. So when we create a period, that is when we create 3 different places within to show the progression of the value. So we start with the smallest place value, then we move on to the tens, and then we finish always with the hundreds place. And it doesn't matter which period we are on because we still have the same pattern. So when we talk about saying our name of our standard form, word form, or expanded, we have to know that when we say it or when we write it, we only name the period once. So name or write the period only once. And it's at the end. So when we say at the end, that could be at the comma. And we'll talk about the difference between when we see the comma and when we come to the end of an actual number, how it's only at the comma that we say the name of the period. So we are going to indicate the periods with our different colors. And this is a visual way to keep track of the periods and their values. So at the top, we're going to give ourselves a key to make sure that we remember the progression of our values. So we started with the ones period. So we're going to put a O for ones. And I'm just going to put that in green. And I'm going to write the color just to remind myself. So I'm writing the word green. And this will be used when I start identifying the ones period within the different forms. Then we have our comma to indicate the break in the period. I'm going to use the red next, and this is called the thousands period. So I put TH for thousands, and I'm going to use this when I underline in red. And then the last period that we're going to talk about right now, we separate with the comma to show the break in periods. This is our millions period, so I'm going to use a blue. So that's why it's an M for millions, but I'm going to write the color that I'm going to use. So this is a visual representation of the 3 different periods that we are going to use when talking about different forms of number. And when we talk about the progression of the different forms of numbers, it's important to remember that no matter the form given or asked to create, the actual number never changes from one form to the next. It's just a visual way to distinguish between how we can represent the same value. So we're going to look at the top example first. So when we look at our values, we're going to use our colors to highlight, meaning that we're underlining it with the colors to represent the periods. So I always start with my green to show the smallest period. The first 3 numbers are always going to be underlined with green to indicate that is the smallest period, the ones place, or the ones period. When we see the break in the periods, that comma, that indicates we're breaking to a new period, so that moves to the next period, which is red, to indicate the thousands. When you look at the first form that's given, this is standard, we can see that the value is in 2 periods. And we have the number 3,000. So we named the digit, and when we got to the comma, we said the actual name of the period. So 3,000, and then I show the value of the 3 last numbers in the hundreds period together, 452. So the last 2 get joined together because we call those friends. And we say those 2 have to stick together. So instead of saying 450, meaning 5 tens, and 2, we say 452. Then when we move to the next form, we're using the same exact value, but now writing in word form. So we're going to use the same two colors to indicate that nothing has been added or taken away from these two periods. So the first smallest period was 452. So I'm going to underline the same value, 452, in the same color to show the value in that ones period is still exactly the same. We then progress to the left to show the break with the comma in periods. And then we're moving to the thousands period. We have a 3 in the thousands place, and it is also written in word form 3,000. So we underline with the same color. So no matter the standard form or the word form, it's exactly the same value, just shown in two different ways. And then we're going to progress to the final form, and we're going to underline which period these values would belong in. So once again, we look at our previous form, 452. So I used my same crayon, and I'm going to underline the 400, the 50, and the 2 to show that it is the same exact value. Then I use my second color to represent the second period, which is just the 3,000. Go ahead and pause your video, and you're going to continue with the next two. And then you can turn it back on to check your work. So now you should have already paused. You should have created your underlining to indicate the 3 different periods or 2 periods depending on the value. So I'm going to go ahead and just underline so you can check your work. So the next one you had the ones period, and then I looked for my next form. So it said 2,310,076. This one is 76, so I'm just underlining that part that represents the ones period. In my third form, I'm doing the same thing with my crayon, underlining the same value for the ones period. Then I progress to the thousands period. So the thousands period is the next 3 numbers grouped. So that's the 310,000 part. So I'm underlining in the red to indicate the second period. Then I find the same value, 310,000. Then I progress to the expanded form. So the 300,000, the 10,000 are used in the same color. Then we have the break in period. Now we're in the millions. So I'm going to underline the 2 in the millions place, show the same value in the word form, and show the same value in the expanded form. The third and final example in this chart, you should have used the green to indicate underlining the 913, the word 913, and the value of 900 plus 10 plus 3. This one, we have one other period, which is the next period, the thousands. So we're underlining the 788,000 in red. We're underlining the same value in word form, 788,000. We know that it's the period because of the comma to break. And then 700,000 plus 80,000 plus 8,000. So we were able to identify that although we show 3 different forms of a number, the number or the value has not changed because it's represented in each of the sections. Moving down to the next part, I want you to go ahead and use your third highlighter color. In the box on the right-hand side of this section is a word bank. It is very important for you to learn how to correctly spell the values of the digits or the place values that we're going to be using. So please refer to this in your classwork, in your notebook, and then when you write a number, you need to know the correct spelling to show the correct value. So for this next part, we are going to learn how to correctly identify the 3 different forms of a number. In each example, you are given one of the forms. So you are going to learn how to then take what has been given and then write the other 2 that are missing. So we always start by looking at what has been given. So we are going to indicate that this first one is expanded, and I always represent it just with an E. And this is a quick way to then label. So when you get to your classwork, you don't have to write the word out, expanded, standard, and word. So we're going to finish by labeling with the first letter of each of the remaining forms. So in this one, they gave us the expanded form. So we then have to push the accordion back together, smush it back together to then indicate the standard and then be able to write it in word form. So when we look at the expanded, I always start with the greatest valued number. This will indicate how many places are needed in the final standard. So this is in the millions, so there is 7 place values. So I'm going to indicate 7 blanks. So I know how to set up the standard number. I then look at the actual values and which digit is shown in the place value to fill in the blanks. So the first number, there's a 7 in the millions, so I put a 7 in the millions. My next one is a 5 in the hundred thousands, so I put a 5 in the hundred thousands. There's a 4 in the 10,000, so I bring the 4 down to the next place value. Then we have a 5 in the thousands, so I put a 5 there. Then we have a 9 in the hundreds place. And then it jumps to a 5 in the ones place. If you follow the steps of looking at the digit in each place value and bringing it down to standard form, if you have a place value that is missing, you need to know that then you place a 0 to indicate there's no value there. It's important to have within your number, but there's no separate value that was needed in expanded form. Now you're going to take your standard number and write it in word form. So we always start with the largest place value. So there's a 7 in the millions, so I'm going to write, using my spelling on the right, the word 7. When we get to the comma, we know that we named the period once because of our tip. So we named the period, which was the million. So 7 million, and it always is followed by a comma. So we say the value, the period's name, and we have a comma. Even though it's word form, it has to have the comma. Then we continue to move on. So the next one is 5. We name the place within the period, so 500, and then we group the last 2 numbers always as friends. So that's 545. So I need to remember how to write 40, and then I show a dash to indicate they're holding hands as friends. So the dash shows me that those 2 values are friends and they're holding hands. So we had 500, the friends hold hands, so 45, and now that we're at a comma, we name the place again. So we know that this period is the thousands, so I'm gonna just tuck it underneath, so 45,000. I follow it with a comma, and then I have to follow it with the last information of the period. So 900. And there's not a value to show friendship, so we just say 905. You do not have the word and in a word form. The word and actually means a decimal place. So this number is a whole number. We do not have a decimal, so we don't have the word and. If you include the word and, it will be marked wrong because it's not showing the correct value. So always make sure that you look back, that you've named the period one time only. You have a comma to show the break between periods. And if there is 2 numbers side by side in the smaller 2 places within a period, they're holding hands as friends, meaning there's a dash between. Go ahead and pause and try the next one on your own. All right, the next one you have is, once again, set up by indicating the capital letter to show the 3 different forms. We start by looking at the form given. We then have to then change them into the 2 missing forms. So standard form is the way that they were given to us originally. So it says 567,096. So if it shows me that there are 6 place values, I need to make sure that at least the greatest one has 6 place values. So there's a 5 in the hundred thousands. So my first value is 500,000. I typically like to track what I'm writing, so I cross it out just to show myself that I have the correct value. The next one is a 6 in the 10,000, so I put a plus sign because I'm pulling it apart to show that I'm still having the same value. So that's a 60,000. Don't forget the commas to show the correct place value. Have a plus sign, so I cross it out. A 7 in the thousands place, so that's 7,000. Plus, there's a 0 in the hundreds, which indicate no value, so I do not have to write it. The 9 is in the tens, so that's a 90. Cross it out. And a 6 in the 1, so I put plus 6. So now I was able to transfer the standard number into an expanded number. Now when I look at my expanded number, I can then change it into my word form. So for this one, we look again, we start with the greatest place value. So this is 500 because that's the name 100 always has to go after the actual digit's name. So 500, the next two values are friends. So we say 67. So we write the word 60, holding the hand of the 7, so 67. Because it's in a period, we need name the period. So 567,000. And then we add the comma because that shows the break in the period. And then our last two are going to be friends, so 96. So I'm going to squeeze that in right here. 90 dash, because that's the hand holding, 96. We never name the period after the ones place because that is not the name of the period for this particular form. So we just name the period for the millions or the thousands. Now moving on to our last example, we once again have the ESW. Go ahead and pause your video, try to work on this example, and then when you're ready, go ahead and push play. So for this one, you have the word form 465. So we're going to go ahead and change that back to standard form. So looking at the word 400, there's no name of a period, so that tells me there's only going to be 3 place values. So I put the 4 in the hundreds place. The last two are friends because they're having the dash between. So 65 are the last two numbers. Then I'm able to pull that into expanded form. So I have to pull each digit out separately to then add them to the expanded form version. So the 4 is in the hundreds place, separated by the plus sign. The 6 is in the tens place, so that's a 60. Separated by the plus sign. The 5's in the ones place, so that is by itself. The last portion is going to be another example of changing it from word, standard, and expanded. So we had standard form. You can pull it apart to expanded or change it into words first. Go ahead and pause the video and then come back and you can check your work. So expanded would be 300 plus 40 plus 1. Word form, we remember the name of the digits first, so 300. The last two are friends, so we always push them together, so this is 41. So 40 is holding the hand of the word 1. The next one says 425,000, so I'm going to put 425,000, which shows me the comma, the break in the period, 582. So we have 582. When we take the standard form, we can then pull it apart to show individual values. So then we have 400,000 plus 20,000 plus 5,000. Then we go to the next side to say plus 500 plus 80 plus 2. And then the last example on this side is shown in an expanded form, and we need to turn it back. So we start with expanded and we go to standard form. So the first number always tells me how many digits. So this one is going to be 7. So you can once again show those dashes to help fill in the correct amount of digits. So we have 5 million. So I put the 5 in the millions. We have 4 in the 10,000s, which means I skipped a place value. That tells me that there's a 0 there. 9 goes in the thousands place. Then 6 in the hundreds place. 7 in the tens place. And 2 in the ones place. So now I have my number written correctly, so I can transform that into the word form. So when we have 5 in the millions, I need to start with the word 5 million, followed by the comma to show the break in the period from the millions to the next period. There's no value in the hundreds place, so I move on to the friends. So these get pushed together. So that's 49. So we're going to write 40 dash, even though my friend is going to hang down there, that handhold is still there. So 49, I'm naming the period because there's a comma. So 49,000. Remember, you only named the period once. Add a comma, add the comma, and then we named the last three. So we have 600. And then the last two hold hands because they're friends. So we say 70-2. So on this particular side of our teach page, we were learning how to transfer the same value from a standard form to the word form and expanded form. Now when you look on the right side, we're going to have an example, which we're going to do the same type of work. So we're going from expanded, standard, and word. So I'm going to give you the first one, which is going to be the word form. So you're going to write 1 million, comma, 50, holding the 8's hand, 1,000, comma, and then the 6 is going to stand by itself. So now that you were given the word form, I want you to pause the video and then check for how would you change that to standard form, and then change it to expanded, and then push play to check. Now that you've had enough time to check your work, you are going to check to make sure that you had enough place values to indicate the first or the greatest place. So 1 million, we put up 1 in the millions place. 58,000, that tells me there's nothing in the hundred thousands, but then we have the friends 50 and 8 holding hands. The last one is broken from the comma, so that means that this 6 is standing in the ones place. So we show the value of zeros in the hundreds and the tens. The 6 is standing by itself. Now when we do the expanded form, we pull one digit at a time that has value to show it standing separately of the value. So we have 1 million separated by a plus sign. The next digit that gives value is a 5 in the 10,000, so that's 50,000 separated by a plus sign. The 8 is in the thousands separated by a plus sign. And the next digit that gives value is in the ones place. So the 6 is by itself, so 6 is by itself. In the practice, you're going to do the same type of work. This one, I am not going to show you the correct answers. You are going to complete it on your own, and when you submit your pictures of your completed notebook pages today, you should have this finish on your own. So we're going to just put finish on your own. So that way when you submit your pictures, I can see your answers. So we're going to start with our word form. So it's going to say 50,000, comma, 740, holding one's hand. So you were given the word form. Your job is to now pause the video and show the standard and expanded form of the same value. Your answers will be posted to Mrs. Ling so I can check your work. The last part of our teaching today for our notebook is going to be the reflection. So the reflection is still going to be guided by Mrs. Ling. So I'm going to share how I could write about the objective of our lesson. Remember, you have sentence stems at the beginning of your notebook that can help you with your writing. I always particularly prefer to write with sequential words. That way I know my steps. So I'm going to start by saying first, comma, I labeled the form of the number given. So that is describing how I write the E, the S, and the W to help my help track my thinking. Next, comma, I labeled the two missing forms. So if your directions do not clearly indicate which form they've given you, you should follow the labeling that Mrs. Ling has taught you, so then you know what's missing and what you need to do. Then I answered using the rule to place my numbers in the correct place value each time. So when I look at this and I remember my trick that Mrs. Ling has taught us about how we can put our dashes to indicate how many place values are needed, that helps me track that I'm giving the value to the correct digits, and then I'm easily able to move from one form to the next. So today, once again, once you're done following the teach page, finish up your practice. Make sure you take a picture of each page that you have in your notebook, and then you're going to finally finish by doing your classwork page. So your page we took out of our blue folders, write classwork at the top. We always just do the even numbers. And today you're going to be working on number 2, 4, 6, number 8 on the front. So that gives you 4 on the front. And then turning it over, you're going to finish with numbers 2, 4, and 6. So remember, today you have 4 pictures to submit to Mrs. Ling, 2 from your notebook, and then each side of your practice or classwork sheet. I will have another video posted tomorrow talking through how your classwork should have been completed, since we are still working on iReady testing.